Right. Go ahead.
Is the water content at the bottom a result of your temperature and humidity analysis, or are you actually measuring water content?
No, the water content is derived from the assembly will take on water from rain exposure, and exterior humidity, and interior humidity, and then you run that for a couple years, right? And then once it sort of begins equilibrating, that's what you get. Right? That is water that's being picked up from the environment that the wall is placed in. Go ahead, you were next.
How accurately are you able to model the existing building walls?
Not terribly accurately, right? And again, that's why, we're all honest here, right, with technicians. One of the problems with the software is that, you're modeling existing materials, historic materials, right? And many of those historic materials are an amalgam of different materials, right? So you have brickwork, right? Brick is brick of some fashion, right? Which with properties that varies wildly. You have mortar, right? With properties that vary wildly. The WUFI doesn't allow you to put brick and mortar together, so you have to come up with a equivalent material. So there's a lot of stuff going on there that you really have to use a lot of judgment on, and that's why it's critical to look at the relative performance. And I can go through various other drawbacks, right? This also assumes that we have a monolithic, nice and dense wall, right? There's no holes in it, right? Never happens, right? So that's why, but it's as good as we can do, right? Because unless you go and and you open up the wall and say, well, I'm going to spend $100,000 and determine that the various openings in the wall constitute 20% of the volume, and I'm going to do a CFD analysis to see what that does. That's what you're stuck with, right? Go ahead.
Yeah, so you can't improve the model by taking your particular brick and your particular mortar and studying it and its qualities, and then adding that data into the model and get a better picture of what's going on.
Unquestionably, and we occasionally do that, and it's a substantial effort because of all the various things that you have to measure, but it can be done. And so if you have a good enough project where that's warranted, I'd love to do it. But this is just to sort of show you how it works and also show you some of the limitations.
I was going to say sort of like that. I've used it in our office and sort of run in or run out what our existing wall was, and we were insulating it to look at closed cell, open cell. And then when we got the submittal, this is the product that's being submitted. Then we had the perms for the actual product being submitted. So that was actually quite simple then, just to change that one, rather than their assumption of the insulation. We could change that one number and see how it affected
Right.
the system.
In new construction, it actually works a little bit better, and I think that's where you're going, right? Once you have predictable performance properties, it's actually not bad, right? So, because I think once you have where we use it a lot is, somebody asks us, well, we're planning to construct this brick masonry wall assembly that's going to condense, and there you have a reasonable expectation because many of these are manufactured materials. You have a good sense of what they're about. But with historic buildings, it becomes very tricky, and there's a lot of judgment involved.
You said something about running the model for a couple of years.
Yeah.
What's that? Why a couple of years?
Well, did somebody else
No,
pile
I
on
want you
that
to
question?
repeat the question.
Repeat the question. Carl wants to know why we would run the model for several years, right? And the reason you do that is just like, when you're shaking out a new building, you want your model to go through a variety of cycles. You want it to equilibrate. You want it to be sort of where it's going to be. Because, the model also starts out, quote unquote, dry. It needs to work with the environment and needs to, reach a equilibrium. One more, Eric.
When you're modeling this section here, that middle section of fiberglass doesn't take into account the framing around the fiberglass, and whether it's wood or steel or whatever would have an impact, since wood can hold more moisture. Is that
Unquestionably,
separate?
unquestionably, right? That's why, it's another thing, if that, I think I don't know where I got this from. I have later ones that are for my jobs, right? Unquestionably, if you got a wood stud in there, right, you have to come up with some equivalent performance metric. If you got a steel stud in there, you got a lot of thermal conduction, right? That throws it off. So, yeah, I mean, y'all picking up on how much judgment it takes to run this, but it's as good as we can do for sort of qualitative, relative assessment of various approaches. There's also a 2D version. We've spent a lot of time here that's a bit more difficult to use, that actually shows you a wall cross-section here, and it shows the relative humidity distribution. And it's got sort of a movie feature where you can actually animate it and shows the humidity moving about. But we'll leave that alone. We've already talked about this, modeling limitations, right? Garbage in, garbage out.